Thank you, and Donnie and team again. Chaps, listen, you guys have put on an incredible 2 days here. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think I can ditto that for just about everyone in this room. Chaps, Chris twisted my arm to come and speak to you and just share my story of what's happened on the Stormberg over the since 2016 till now. We've been playing this game for, what's it now? Add that up, nearly 9 years. I say some of the things that have happened have been nothing short of biblical. Just give you a little background on where I'm from. We're farming in Molteno up on the Stormberg. We're on about 6,000 hectares, of which half of it's mine, half we in business with an aunt of mine. We average rainfall of about 520 millimeters a year. We never get average. It's always way below or way over. I think you guys can attest to that too. Obviously, we're one of the coldest places in South Africa. Temperatures can drop to -15, -18, low sweet beans -21. It can create a whole lot of extra challenges. Burst pipes, grass sometimes doesn't grow, but what I'll show you today is some amazing things happen, and we've got grasses coming up on the Stormberg that are grass green 365 days of the year. They're winter green grasses, and I think with this management, what we can find is that these things, what happens is that it just kicks into gear, and if you can farm with green grass throughout the year as opposed to your annuals that are frosting off, I think you're going to make a lot more money, and ultimately at the end of the day, you're going to have to feed less lick, and it's going to be more profitable. Okay, I'll start today just with that big ball in the sky, chaps. That big sun, it comes up every morning. We walk outside. That is a free source of energy. We're sitting in a country here, we've got Eskom problems, we've got no power. That's a ball of power, chaps, and we need to learn how to harness that ball of power. You mealie farmers have got bigger, broader leaves than we've got. In Molteno, we're busy trying to coax little grasses with blades this far, but the more blades of grass you can make, chaps, the more that you can capture. It's that simple. So what I'm going to try and do today is just try and explain to you guys, I'm trying to keep it as simple and just try and make it understandable for the layman. For me, in the beginning, when you looked at this and somebody said to you, listen, you've got maybe a potential to double the carrying capacity of your farm, you look at the guy and you think to yourself, no man, but that's impossible. You can't do something like that. Well, I'll go as far as saying today, we've doubled it and we're probably going to double it again. It's not impossible. One's got to change the way you think. We tend to think of livestock, we're livestock farmers first and foremost, and we think we're managers of livestock. They're only just a tool. Obviously we've got to manage them and we've got to look after them, but they're only one tool in the greater scheme of things. If we could take it one step further, some may say that we're farming grass. What we've got to understand is first and foremost, we're managers of an ecosystem, and we need to understand how all of this ties in. Every little hoho, I think a lot of you guys were in that top paddock at Donnie's. I was blown away by the insect numbers that you could see in that paddock. I mean, a lot of the things I don't even know what they are. Even the expert told us he didn't know what they are. There was a smorgasbord of all sorts of things going on in that paddock. So if you can just put us on the right-hand side, we need to understand that every little thing has got its place in the system. And what I'd just like you guys to look at the bottom there, that little circle there with the little hojas below the surface. We've been looking a lot at what's going on above the surface. I'm going to start my talk today by just explaining to you guys that, and some of the other previous speakers have alluded to this, we need to actually take it one step further, even than the grass. And we need to start looking at what we can't see, chaps. It's something we know so little about. But I can tell you now, the biggest breakthroughs in the next couple of years are going to come from soil microbiologists. And soil microbiology, chaps, is going to be the next big breakthrough. They're all under our feet and we don't see them, so we tend to not think about them. But as I say, these are the little critters that make the magic happen. Okay, and once again, just a quick one. The sun is the driver of it all. So obviously, a plant photosynthesizes, takes carbon dioxide in, produces sugars, it exudes those sugars through its roots, and it feeds these little microbes. So how we feed those plants and how we manage the above ground plants is extremely important with what's going on underneath the ground. Everybody tends to overthink this thing, chaps. Anything that makes a hole in your farm, it allows air and water to go in there. Whether it's an earthworm, whether it's a dung beetle, whether it's a microbe, whether it's a gerbil, it doesn't matter what it is. Whatever makes a hole in your farm, guys, it's not rocket science. We want things that make holes in our farm so that the air and the water can go in. It's literally that simple. This side, I always just say, we need to actually even go as far as saying that the most important livestock on our farm are soil microbes. We tend to just look at our cattle and our sheep. And I'm going to just show you a couple of slides that are coming up here, just to put it in perspective, how important these little chochos that we can't see are. And we know little about them, but we need to start looking at them very carefully. So us as humans and our livestock, we are embedded in a microbial world, okay? They reckon there, I got that thing off the internet, it might be wrong, they say 43% of our body cells, only 43% are actually human cells. The rest are made up of microbes, bacteria. Our cows as well, we are embedded in a microbial world. So what's going on in that cow's gut is incredibly important. And ultimately, the same microbes that are living on those plant roots are the same microbes that are in that cow's gut, are the same microbes ultimately that are in our gut. This nutrient pathway we need to start looking at, and the microbes are crucial to that. So as they say, 1 teaspoon of soil is equivalent to more and more people on earth. That's a hell of a statement, Jeff. That's lots of chochos in a very little teaspoon. Okay, so that little slide obviously just shows, obviously, photosynthesizing plant. You can see the exudates, or the little sugars getting sweated out through the plant, and those little microbes live all along the edge of the plant root. And I've been watching a lot of Elaine Ingham and Christine Jones's work. I'd suggest any of you guys, whether you're a Millie Farm or anybody here today, go and Google those two names. They are probably the world leading experts on soil microbiology at the moment. And even there's lots they don't know. But what they're starting to find out is that a diverse sort of plants, if you've got lots of plants together, growing together, they actually hold each other up. And the more different species you can have growing up together, each specific plant they're finding has got species-specific microbes. And what they reckon is that those microbes have each got enzymes that can actually, a certain plant might be good at absorbing the microbes on that plant's root, might be good at absorbing, say, selenium, for instance. Another one might be good at absorbing, say, phosphate, for instance. And that's why we need them all. We can't just have a farm with just rooigras out there. You'll see now in a minute, I'll use another slide as an example. You look out of a window, anywhere you are on earth, what do you see? That big green column in the middle, that's plants. This is an interesting study. I actually stole the slide out of Christine Jones's presentation. It's a study done by a university in the States, and they tried to quantify all life on Earth in one image. So that big green column you see there, that is plants. That's all the plants on Earth in gigatons. So a gigaton is something like 1 trillion tons. Forget me if I've got that figure right. It's something like a trillion kilograms, sorry. In actual weight, actual kilograms. So that actual green column is all the plants on Earth. And if you divide that slide in half, all the little chochos you see on the left-hand side, the brown ones are bacteria. The little green ones above, I think they're archaeous, protists, and whatever. But anyway, that is your microbial life, everything on the left-hand side. And if you look at the right-hand side, okay, if you take the whole right-hand side and you'll fit it into those two little grey blocks at the bottom of the green column, that's all above life that we can see on Earth. Every animal, every human being, every bird, put into two little grey blocks at the bottom of that plant column, if you can see that. What I'm trying to stress here is that the way we manage plants, that green column, has a huge effect on how these things are taken care of. So we need to manage our plants in a way to create more of these little chochos under the soil, and they ultimately take care of all of us above ground. So these things are a big deal, chaps, and nobody's looking at them because we can't see them. They're underground, they're below our feet, Okay, so now just to get you back to what we're doing, back to reality, what we're doing on the farm. Obviously it's not the cow, it's the how. Typically, a lot of you guys are converted here. Obviously a conventional system, it's just a downward degrading spiral. Everything just starts getting less. You put your cattle out in a camp and you just let them graze there, and it's a dame safe, chaps. Most of the guys, let's face it, I was there. You put them, you say 100 head of cattle, and you put them in a camp and you think, okay, well, let's see how we go. We're going to put them in there maybe a week, maybe 10 days, depending on where you are. It's a thumbsuck. And you think, okay, hang on, they're getting hungry somewhere down the line, you're going to move them. But you end up leaving them too long in that area, and invariably they're too spread out, and the whole ecosystem starts degrading. You'll see less wildlife habitat, more eroded soil. You'll see the list goes on there. You can have a look there. So what we're tending to do is starting to bunch animals wherever we can, and we start getting them moving. They don't want to be, you don't want them standing around. They need to be moving. Okay, this is just a lovely slide. I thought you Free Staters here like plowing the earth up from one end to the other. I'm not going to point fingers, but when it rains, we saw a similar slide on Mike's thing. So it's incredible. Obviously, there's no microbial life in that soil on the right, the tilled soil on the right-hand side. You get an inch of rain, goes over that fence, it just sits there. It can't sink in. Ultimately, by 12 o'clock the next day, it's evaporated. And there's not even much vegetation on the left-hand side there. If you look at the left-hand side, yet the water's still gone in. There are holes in the soil. There are khokhas living in there. Okay, so we need to create life. We don't want to be killing things. That's why I put that slide back there again. So you can see all those khokhas making holes in the farm. Okay, infiltration. These next couple of slides I've actually stolen from a chap called Richard T. He's made it his life mission to go and actually research and study all the guys in the States that are doing this conservation agriculture, and he's made it his life mission to see what they're doing as opposed to others and why they're more successful. So obviously infiltration, a lot of us are farming on that red stripe on the left-hand side. You can see half the farm's bare ground, half the farm's got some plants on it. So we need to start, and if you have a look there, it's only about 25% infiltration. So let's say if my neighbour says, "El, what rain did you get?" No, we got 25 mils. And he asked me, "What did you get?" I'd like to just say to him, I hope I got it all. Doesn't matter what fell out the sky. It's what went in, what was effective. How much of that rain that fell out of the sky actually went into the ground and became effective, as opposed to running off and creating the river, making a brick brown sludge down the other end. Okay, and then, as I mentioned earlier, managing for plant biodiversity is incredibly important. This obviously enhances your ecosystem function, and we need to just start managing to get as many different grasses. Obviously, we're in a grassfield system, and as many, not even just grasses, forbs, wildflowers, legumes, anything that we can get growing in our veld, even the weeds. If the cattle eat them, leave them, doesn't matter. We need to just start getting the whole system going, and the more plant species you've got above ground, the more microbes they're going to then sustain below ground. Okay, this is just a lovely little slide. Just shows a nice random example of biodiversity. So when you've got biodiverse plants above ground, you've got a biodiverse root structure underground. And if you're sitting, say, let's just say the third plant here from the right-hand side, you see there with the short roots. Let's hypothetically say that was rooigras. You're sitting with a whole farm of rooigras. You're not going to be doing very well, because you're going to be mining out that top, say, 5 centimeters of soil, and you've got no biodiversity, and everyone thinks, rooigras plaas is a lekker plaas. You're dead in the water. That thing gets green early in January. By the end of February, March, it's gone over, and it's not worth very much. So you need biodiversity. And with this change of management, what we're finding is species that have been extinct for 50 years, ACOX described them as near extinct in the 50s, you'll see a bit later coming into play. Okay, so obviously, the other side of the coin is everybody tends to think that oorbeweiding is a factor of too many animals. You've got too many animals. Yes, if you leave them in an area, you will oorbeweid area very quickly. But it's got nothing to do with the number of animals. God created that Serengeti. That's not oorbeweiding. Why? Because they move. They have to move. They can't stay in one place. So they dung and urinate, soil the area they're in today, so they've got to move. So obviously they're moving through countries. So what we're trying to do is obviously simulate that exact movement on our farms. And in order to do that, we're cutting the farms up into tiny little strips, as you saw with Dani yesterday. I'm not quite as intense as he is. Obviously we've got 6,000 hectares we've got to deal with. And we've got a lot of conventional infrastructure we're still dealing with, but as and where we can, we're literally taking that out and literally putting blocks in. And the more camps you've got, the better. Ultimately, you need to start looking at north of 100 at least per herd. Okay. So we're obviously trying to simulate that great herd from the Serengeti and get them moving around our landscape. Okay, so doing so, the first thing you've got to do is look at water. When you put 500 head of cattle and cows and calves together, that cow's drinking about, I always say, it's probably about 70 litres of water, 50 for the cow and about 20 for the calf. I always say just work on about 100, just to be safe for that hottest day in December in the middle of a drought. As I say, water is absolutely everything. Go and find it. You'll see a little bit later on. I'll show you how we've developed it. Okay, then we go and divide it in many small paddocks or strip grazers as we possibly can. And then obviously we put them on that little area for as short as possible and then stay out of that area for as long as possible. That is the key. Then the real secret is the time out. That long as possible out. The rest is that's the secret to all. The plant has to fully recover. It needs to express itself, it needs to go to seed, and before you come back and graze it again. Okay, the ecosystem processes, energy flow, gets back to that big ball in the sky. It's not rocket science, chaps. We need leaves, we need solar panels. I think the gentleman down here mentioned and showed us a solar panel earlier. Green solar panels are far better than normal ones, and the more we can make more of them, just by changing our management. Okay, so maximize the flow of energy through plants and soil. Obviously, you've got to cycle that water, which gets back to anything that makes little gaatjies in your farm is your friend. You mineral cycle, you need to start cycling that grass. You can't let it go too far over. You'll see we using licks like Makoska brew, which are very cost effective and probably about a quarter of what a conventional lick works. It's not for everybody, but we'll explain a little bit later about that. So you need to cycle that mineral, and you need to get that plant back on the ground so it can re-go fresh again for the following season. And then community dynamics gets back to that biodiversity again. You need lots of different plants growing together. So obviously improving rangeland soil health, you've got to try and improve the cover. Everyone says, yeah, it's impossible, you can't double your stocking rate in your farm. If you go and walk in the veld and you've got spacings between your plants, between your polla, if you just try and quantify those gaps between those polla and you just make another grass plant, try and cover it in between, that's where you're going to double your stocking rate of your farm. So if you can picture that in your mind, it's literally that simple. It's not that hard. Obviously perennial plants, deep-rooted perennials, we're seeing coming back thick and fast. You want those rather than annuals. They're going to stay forever and they're just going to get bigger and healthier. And then manage for the most productive plants, and then obviously leave adequate residue behind. So it's a bit of an interesting one. This is why I like calling it adaptive management. You're dealing with nature, which is constantly changing. There's no one single silver bullet approach. You have to adapt to the changing seasons. You may still have to destock, but you're going to see with a system like this, you're going to see the trouble coming long before your neighbors are going to see it coming, and you're going to have time to destock. Okay, minimize bare ground. Bare ground's enemy number one. You don't want bare ground. Obviously, you would rather have a plant in its place. It's common sense. Funny thing, that common sense. You'll see a chap here. I had a mentor, a guy by the name of Dave Quinton. When I came back farming, that was in the early 2000s, and he was like my mentor. He got me into this. I've been doing HM for about 36 years, and I said to him the one day, but Uncle Dave, this is just common sense. He said to me, my boy, it's interesting, that common sense. It's not all that common. Okay, this is a lovely slide. This is also out of Richard Teague's talk. Okay, this is a study they did in the States. That camp, you can see those little green dots are a GPS collar they put on a cow. They took 300 head of cattle and they put them onto a 3,000 hectare farm or camp or whatever you want to call it. And they left them there for a whole year. And they took a reading every single day. Did you think those cattle ate that camp uniformly? Of course they didn't. They went and sat on that little riverbed. They ate all the sweets. So 39% of that area was unutilized throughout that year. They didn't even go and stand there. It's quite a mind-blowing little slide, this. 41% of the GPS points on only 9% of that area throughout that whole year. Okay, so now you start getting the picture here. We need to change things. We can't just put cattle out to graze. The effective stocking rate there was 21 acres a cow, and effective, what was that? The stocking rate was 21, and effectively was only 9 acres a cow. Okay, so you start getting the idea. We have to actually start going to put fencing in to push those animals up those slopes and start grazing the whole farm, as opposed to you've got a 3,000 hectare farm, but you're only farming on 39% of it. Okay, so obviously it gives us more control. Once you start putting watering points in, obviously that's a wagon wheel design. I'll show you, we'll go into why that's perhaps not the best idea. It's better than the slide I showed you before, but squares and rectangles, it actually doesn't matter what shape it is, but squares and rectangles are better. Okay, so what I want to show you in this slide there, we're going back to that 1,000 hectare camp with those 3,000 hectare camp with those 300 cows on. If you look at those 4 little blocks in the foreground, if you set up your plot, say what's it going to tell you? Over a year, you can go measure all you want, it's not going to tell you anything. They didn't even stand on those blocks. So this is where one's got to you need to look at a whole farm approach, and you need to do research on a whole farm approach. Okay, just managing desired outcomes. Obviously you've got to match the numbers of animals to the available forage. Spread grazing throughout the whole ranch. Obviously we want to put them into all those little corners. You can't just have a berg op your plaas and not use it. You need to use every little square inch of your farm so that you can factor that rest in everywhere else, because it's all about that rest. Obviously defoliate moderately in the growing season. So what we try and do in the growing season is the management's literally on its head. In the growing season we want to move fast, and in the dry season we can then come back with licks and try and clean up, and we'll get onto that management a little bit later in the talk. Obviously adequate recovery, you saw that slide before you come back, and then that word adaptive pops up again. Chaps, there's no one size fits all. You need to manage this thing, and you need to have your eye on the ground all the time. You need to be seeing what's going on there and assessing. I always say to the guys, every day before we put that herd in a camp, every little camp's going to have a different, you're going to have what are we doing here today? Are we trying to get rid of that bloody overgrazed section in the top left-hand corner? Is it the time of the year when we're trying to deck our kuya, that we're trying to get them in calf? One's got to ask yourself all these questions, and you've got to start balancing out the production of the animals with the production of the grass. It's not all about growing grass. You've still got to make money at the end of the day. Okay. Okay, so this all sounds wonderful and interesting, but how the hell do you go about doing this? It's easier said than done, and I can tell you now, it's taken a hell of a lot of elbow grease. It's been a lot of work, and it's cost quite a bit of money. You'll see down the line. So you stand there and you look at a block of land, and it's daunting, chaps. You look at a 6,000 hectare block of land that's very undeveloped. The water's not right, the fences are buggered. So you're hiring a new farm, and you sit there and you think to yourself, okay, nou waar gaan ons begin? And if I can say to anybody, just get a map on a wall and just start looking at what you've got. Look where the water is. Water's number one. You'll see where we're going to go. This slide is the slide of two of my properties. The first one, that little white property you see at the top, we started developing in 2016. I refer to it as the baby elephant. And that blue block we took over about 4.5 years is about a 3,500 hectare block. I was handed it on a plate and said go, and we suddenly had to suddenly stop cutting up filth, because now all of a sudden we needed more animals to stock that place. So this is what I was saying. You've got to sit down every day and ask yourself, what is my priority today? Are we grazing grass? Are we making grass? Or are we now suddenly going to have to stock up a new farm? So one's gets back to that word context again, I suppose. But anyway, the little phrase I put on the side there, this mentor of mine, Dave Quinton, just said to me, I said to him, Uncle Dave, where do you start? And he just said to me, my boy, how do you eat an elephant? That was his phrase he used, and I just thought it was a wonderful analogy. How do you eat an elephant? You can eat an elephant. You need to cut it up into lots of small chunks. And that's essentially what you've got to do. Just start cutting that farm up. And to any new guy starting, what I'd suggest is don't rush into it. You don't have to put 100 blocks in at once. You've got 40 camps on your farm. You're going to have to work with those 40 camps for a while until you've got enough money to do something. What I'd suggest is just jack the water up first to those 40 camps. And then once you've got that going and jack the water up twice as good as what you think you're going to need. So if you're going to put a 50 mil pipe in, rather than put a 63 mil pipe, if you can afford it. And then just get going and slowly cut those 40 camps in half, and then you'll have 80, and then eventually cut those in half, and you'll have 160. or else you can just do what Donnie's doing, and then you've gleaned a whole lot of ideas the last couple of days anyway. Okay, just to look at the baby elephant, I'm going to move through these quickly. This was just what the property looked like. The little red lines are the internal fences on what was my dad's initial property. That's about 850 hectares. Not much you can do with a really badly designed wagon wheel and 11 camps. In 2016, we bought the wagon wheel in the blue. This was just one of the ideas I was thinking of, actually just making, instead of one horribly designed wagon wheel, I was thinking of making 4 with a central wagon wheel. And essentially, that's what we ended up doing. We ended up literally just making a checkerboard. Are you looking at that and you're probably thinking, how on earth is he going to, how many gates, how many water, how's he doing this? You'll see a little bit later. Okay, so that's just the whiteboard I work with on a daily basis. I always just say, just get a whiteboard of your farm on the thing, and the plans will slowly start falling into place. And something you can scribble on, you can change on, you can plan new things, and just a good uncluttered map with not too much detail on is worth its weight in gold. Okay, so that's the whole property as it stands now. The baby elephant up at the top, that was our development in 2016. So you can see a lot of the farms still being managed conventionally. Obviously, with all of this in mind, we're still running bunched herds wherever we can. And if you look at the 8 blocks at the bottom, this is the development I've just been busy with. We've actually we took conventional fencing that we took out, that we could reuse, and some new, and we built 800 hectare blocks with a 20-meter alleyway down the middle, and we've gone in and cut each of those the 8 blocks into 16 little 6.25 hectare squares. Okay, so those are the 8 blocks. You can see how we were grazing them through the winter as a 100 hectare block. Now we've gone in there, it was always the plan to cut that up into 127 little squares. Okay, so just to give you an idea, the map on the left obviously is what that was the old fencing that we ripped out. And fortunately for my sake, when we took over that farm, that fencing was about 100 years old. And it's just too expensive to do it with conventional fencing, chaps. Electric fencing, you've seen how easy Donnie does it. It's a little bit more labor, but it works. And this was one of my original plans. And what I say is just get a piece of tracing paper and work with different ideas. And slowly the thing develops. And you'll think, hang on, if we do it like this, start measuring, what's the pipe going to cost? Hang on, if we put the pipe dwarfs ways instead of that, it might cost a bit. And just start playing with the thing. And then slowly the actual plan develops. Okay. Managing proactively for best results. This is just a very interesting slide I thought I'd throw in there, just in terms of grazing felt. Obviously, this is one specific species, and this is where the difficulty comes in, is we're managing complexity, especially in a felt scenario, guys. What grass are you going to look at? We've got like north of 35, heading for 40 different species in our mix. Which one are you going to look at? Some grow this tall, some grow this tall, some grow like this tall. But anyway, by and large, if you start managing like this, you'll see it starts becoming a far more uniform sward, and it gets easier and easier to manage. But I just put that up there just to show this is where the adaptive management comes in. If you take too much, you can see right up to 50%. You've almost got no root loss. And then as soon as you go to 60, you lose almost 50% of the roots. So this is where, especially in the growing season, one's got to be very careful to not take it down too low. Because what do you need to grow a blade of grass? Besides air and water and soil, you need a blade of grass to grow grass. You have the sonpaneel nodig. Doesn't help you take it off right at the surface. You're going to be dead in the water. It's going to take you a long time, because that plant's going to have to regrow the roots before it then starts regrowing leaves. And then obviously water. Drinking water, I'm talking about, not besproeiing. Only skilpunt and nima. Drinking water is everything, chaps. As I say, you've got to go and find it. And I find lots of farmers, you've got windmills on your farm, you've got boorgaatjies, you don't even know what's down there. Go and take those pipes out there, go and get a submersible pump, put them down there and go and find the water. A lot of the time you've got it and you don't even know you've got it. Okay, and then electric fencing. Obviously we're running sheep with cattle, merino sheep with cattle, so we've got to have 3 strands as opposed to Donnie's single strand. So to now go and move 3 strands every day, there's going to be a bit boggy. So what we've decided now is to actually just put permanent electric fencing in. Okay, sun's not only for water, for growing plants, it's also for water. Windmills just don't cut it. Once you start heading over 250 and we've just put a herd of 500 together. You need these submersible solar pumps are the only thing that works. When you start thinking and your mind starts going with these things, you start thinking out the box. And when you're starting for a guy that hasn't got a lot of money, this is just one I made when we started. We actually just put a solar submersible onto an old trailer. That's now effectively a mobile windmill. You can now take that thing from borehole to borehole. You can go and drop that submersible down the hole, and you can take it to the next hole and go and drop it down the other hole without actually having to go and buy 3 submersible pumps. You can just buy the one and it follows the herd, and you can put it down various holes. So you just need to start thinking out the box. And I haven't got a slide of it at the moment, but somebody actually shared a slide the other day of a mobile reservoir. Chap actually took a back of a big lorry and just put a liner in there and filled it with water. And now he's got a reservoir he can go put wherever he needs it and link up to his water system, and there he's got a mobile reservoir. So just to say, one's got to start thinking out of the box with these things. Okay, obviously important to match your flow rate with the stocking rate. You've got to take into account, as I said, I work on about 100 litres a day, and what we're doing is we're putting these 200,000 litre reservoirs up in the aspect. And chaps, if I can say, that is probably black pipe, black polythene pipe is probably the best invention under the sun, and probably one of your best investments you'll ever make on a stock farm. It was the most expensive thing we bought. The total cost of the development in 2016 on that little baby elephant was about roughly 750,000. Included the fencing, the pipe, the solar pump, reservoir, 4-wheelers, the container I put the 4-wheeler in. Everything we needed came to about 750,000. The latest development's been about double that. Obviously, we started with a 50mm mainline pipe, and I had a little pop-up going off there, and that's become our biggest bottleneck. 25mm pop-up coming off the 50. We're going to change it all now. In the new development, we've put in 63s with 50mm pipes coming off that. So we started with something looking like that little one on the left, and now we're moving to 63mm pipes and 50mm quick couplers coming off that for the cattle. Okay, there's your 200,000 litre reservoir. We've put up about 3 of those. I just call that chap, he's called Peace of Mind. If you want to go to the sea and he's full, there's enough water there for 2 weeks. And then 1 mobile trough goes with that herd every day. So every 250 or 300 meters, we've got a plug-in point, and that mobile trough goes with the herd. Just to give you an idea of what it looks like, so each one of those red dots is one of the pop-ups or one of the risers, and those little squares are all roughly 300 by 300, so it's a 9-hectare square, and then the trough just moves along with the system. And we bought the little wagon wheel, this 530 hectares on the left-hand side, and from 2016 to 2022, we ran that herd. We took it from, I'll show you now, we took it from about 160 Angus cows, and we're now running about 275 Angus cows, and it was about 500 replacement ewes, and we're sitting at about 750 in that same system. And I'll show you what's happened with the grass a little later on. Okay, now that we had all the fences in, it was time to put the baby elephant to the test. There we go, started with 160 and 500 replacements. Okay, just to show you guys, this is a lovely example of what it looked like before we started. Okay, so this is just a lovely example on my farm. In fact, it still looks like that. We haven't developed that area. It's got a little bit better, but typical of a big camp where you were continuously grazing. So you've got long, rankerige, dry, underutilized grass that's gone over, and then you've got overgrazing in the foreground, what I call the tennis court. Or it's almost like a cement block in the foreground. So that is the problem. And this is the problem faced not just on my farm, it's all over South Africa and all over the world. So when you put animals out to graze, they're going to select the sweet stuff, and they're going to walk around the unpalatable stuff, and they're going to trample and overgraze, and then you've got overrest and overgrazing going on all over your farm. And the only way to fix that is to cut your farm into tiny little squares and increase that impact. Okay, so we've got our type specimen in Molteno is a grass called grazier. Die Stormberg platplaar. Everyone is, it's a very good grass, and everyone raves about it because not many people have got it. But when it's fraught like that, it's still useless, nothing. Okay, over a 6-year period with adaptive multi-paddock grazing, you can see what we did is it became a far more uniform sward. And about 4 years ago, out of that bed of Tritrachty, which frosts back in the winter, in the middle of winter, this was June, July, these little green things started sticking their head up. We'd never seen them before. It's a grass called Electro-Tricon, and it's been absolutely incredible what's happened with that grass specifically. And the system is changing, chaps. This is what I want to try and say to you. It's constantly changing. And when you change the management, it's going to change more. The most exciting thing for me was going to visit James Brody in Graaff-Reinet about 3 years ago, and all he wanted to do was show me his Trachty. And I walked into this camp of his 40 kilometers north of Graaff-Reinet in the middle of the Karoo on the Sneeuwberg, and I saw the swath of Trachty, and I walked and I could see, these little things coming up in James's farm as well. So, and the beauty of that little thing is it stays grass green throughout the year, right through a Molteno winter. That's that same grass a year and a half later, just to show you, that was going into autumn, grass green underneath, but it shot up right to almost halfway up a cow's back. Just to show you what can happen, there's a calf getting lost in that Electro-Tricon. That's what a cow wants to eat. That's just a lovely mix of clovers, Electro-Tricon, not that. Somebody gives you a frot steak, you're not going to want to eat it either. This is I just threw this little slide in here. This is one of the grasses we've seen coming back. We've only started seeing it the last year and a half. It's a grass called Sacali africanum. In Aycock's book, going back, he describes this thing as in the 50s being nearly extinct. It's starting to come up like hair on a dog's back, all down our flays. I could name a whole lot more, but this is just one of the exciting ones that we're watching at the moment. Okay, just to show you again what that Electro-Tricon got to. And this brings me to the next point. Once that grass starts getting away from you like that, and then it poses another problem, because obviously now you've gone over. You'll see now. Okay, there's the Aycock's notes I've been dealing with. One goes and reads up about that Sacali africanum in that book. He'll tell you all about it. I just put this slide in, guys, because it's quite a difficult thing. There are not very many grass books. Fritz has got his grasses, and his book's very good, and he's just started his app. But in terms of actually IDing these plants, there are not many books available for IDing the species. And what I'd like to encourage you guys is, chaps, listen, this is, for us, we don't have millies and soils. This is our hell. And most guys can't even identify 4 or 5 of these species on their hands. Guys, we need to get off our butts and start learning what we're dealing with. I'm talking to myself here as well. And just encourage you guys to start seeing what's there. Start opening your eyes. Start seeing what's happening out there. Okay? Just a nice little graph showing you the S-curve of a grass plant, and one needs to start understanding how this works and learning how soon or how quick you need to come back. And then obviously it goes into senescence, like that photograph you just saw. And then one's got to now start thinking about how you're going to deal with that. And then obviously we started with the Makoska brew. Now, I sort of pioneered it in the Molteno district. The whole district thought I was mad. They said to me, you're going to kill your cows. Feeding cows 40% urea is going to go absolutely mad. And we did kill a couple. We killed about 10. But that was the best money I've ever lost in my life, because the rest are adapted, and the intake, it's just what you get in all the other licks. It's just the intake is far higher concentrate. So it's basically just Makoska brew is it's urea, obviously urea-based lick, and it's got a bit of bypass protein, either cottonseed oil cake or soy meal, and a bit of zeolite, bit of feed lime, a little bit of salt, and a bit of ammonium sulfate. So there's not a lot to it, but this has been the goose that's laid the golden egg for us. I'd suggest if anyone wants to use it, it is dangerous when you start pushing urea to 40%. You need to get your animals adapted. I can't stress that enough. Just go and research it. Go and educate yourself about it. But as a beersboer, this has been the biggest thing that unlocks gets those microbes humming in that cow's gut and just allows them to utilize that grass. Okay, that's what it looks like. The intake, because the concentrate is so high, is so low, we're probably sitting at about 50 grams, 60 grams a day now in summer, and it'll go to probably about 150 grams in winter. Okay. And we had to design these little lick trailers. Obviously the sheep are running with the cattle. 40% urea, sheep's not going to last very long if it sticks its nose in there. So we had to make sure it was high enough that the sheep couldn't get their noses in. And obviously it can't get wet. So we built these little things with, you can see the channel line built into the structure of that little afdaki there. Acts as a built-in gutter. Okay, and then with that, That's what your dung looks like in the middle of June, July in Molteno on that brood. You get them humming and you effectively create a summer situation inside that cow's gut in the middle of winter. Okay, this brings me to the next little part of my talk here, the ecological engineers, my new best friends. We're going to these little things that make gaitjies in your farm. Chaps, it's amazing. We just tend to use a thing like ivermectin, and I mean, I've used it for years, we all use it, but until I got the system humming, we started 2016, this is probably around about 2020, we had an outbreak of gall sickness in the area. And we don't have lots of ticks in Molteno, but as a result of that, our cattle have got very little resistance. And I started losing, we lost about 12 or 13 cows to gall sickness that year, and I panicked, and I got out the ivermectin and I inoculated them. And I still regret the day. We're still not back to the dung beetle activity now from that one inoculant that I did back in 2020. We're 5 years on. We're getting there. But chaps, you've just got to think, before you go and use something on your animals, the effect on the actual overall ecology is massive. Okay, so have a look at that little pile of soil there next to the dung. That's created by that little chap, little rhino beetle. Okay, that chap makes about a 2 Rand coin size hole. He's a tunneler, so he goes right down below the soil, the malongwe or the pat. In 2016, when we started, I was finding maybe one of those. That's the main guy. We've got about 7 or 8 different species. That's the main guy that makes the biggest hole. And I'd find maybe one of those holes under every 15th or 16th dung pat. Last year, the most I counted was 20, about 15 or 16 around that dung pile. The most I counted last year was about 27 under one dung pat. Every single dung pat's now got about 5 or 6 of them. Okay, so now when you're farming in a conventional system, your cattle are too spread out. You take 100 cows, put them in a 100 hectare camp for a week, and you go and walk in there, and your dung pats will be 15 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters. You can picture the scene. They're too spread out. When you put your cattle together like that, one cow poops out 30 kilograms a day. A herd of 500 cows and calves, you're looking at nearly 20 tons worth of crap coming out of that herd in one day. Okay, you put those things together, now you've got 27 holes under one dung pat, and you've now got stepping stone distribution of that dung. What's going to happen when an inch of rain goes over there? You suddenly start getting the picture, chaps. Maybe it wasn't such a good idea to torfer those things with ivermectin. But what I'm saying is it's a difficult thing. This is where a lot of us are still going to have to use ivermectin. I'm not saying just go straight off it. Chaps living at the coast, if they don't inoculate their cattle with ivermectin, they're going to go out of business. But just know and start understanding that this is what's happening. Maybe if you're farming at the coast and you've got a breed that needs ivermectin, you maybe need to start thinking about changing your breed to something that can actually maybe live there without being inoculated, because you suddenly start seeing the effects on the ecology. Okay, this is a lovely little thing that happened. We alluded to it earlier when we were on the panel. Chaps, this was an amazing observation, and coming from a conservation background, I was watching obviously very carefully when we started back in 2016. We hadn't even finished, we were probably about halfway through that first rotation. And on what was that tennis court I showed you earlier, all those compacted areas, just with that first little squamble with those hooves with those cows, this is what started coming up. It's a little anky, it's almost like a little sedge, it's not a grass, it's a pioneer. Nature's a boar's bare ground. It's always going to put a weed in its place to try and cover. And you've got to deal with those pioneers with the first couple of years and wait for that succession to build and to start coming back. So what actually happened here was amazing. So these things started coming up on all those bare areas like hair on a dog's back. So much so I was taking photographs. It was incredible. So if you look at that mountain in the background, it'll give you some sense of direction. There's the same mountain, the same trees. This is fast forward on to June, July that same year. That whole area that looked like that was now upended. It looked like somebody put a conch skill through there. I was like, good grief, now what's going on here? You can actually see that the Anky's got a little geophyte or a little pea-sized corm on its root. And I had an idea of what was going on, but I didn't actually quite know at the time. But I thought to myself, goodness, I'll just go through a couple more slides. And you can see these big sand pits that started developing. totally denuding the whole, one area is probably about as big as the skier. I'll show you that a little bit later. And when you start seeing this going on, you start panicking, you start thinking, good grief, now what's going on here? Okay, there, all of a sudden now, that's a 45 mil size hole. It's not a little 2 rand coin size hole like those dung beetles. One had to stand back for a little bit and just look at it objectively and think, okay, what's actually going on here? There the little Ankie is, now obviously in the winter, frosted off and the pea-sized corm. So I said to the kids, come, we're going to go see what's going on here. Armed with a bit of peanut butter and some muesli, we went and set some traps. Okay, I'll just have a look at that mountain in the background, guys. It's going to feature later when we end the talk. Just use it as a bit of a reference. There you can see all around the kids' feet. This was one of the gerbil colonies. We just set the traps there. Okay, there the traps. You can see the soil's all been beautifully loosened up. It used to be really compacted. And if you stood on that, your foot would probably go about that deep into that loose soil. There it is. Ek dink paar van julle in hierdie kamer ken daai ouetjie. Nagmeisie. Go and Google that thing. There's not much good that you'll find on the internet about that thing. You ask these milliboere here, and you go and ask the canola farmers in the Western Cape. Tetera brantia, high-fold gerbil. We caught about 15 in the first night. Okay, so effectively what happened is that Ankie went mad, created overabundance of food, and we had a population explosion of these things. Okay, but there it is. One can go look it up in Smithers. It'll give you the whole write-up on that little chap. Here's one of is what I was talking about, probably as big as this room. There's my 4-wheeler. This is taken from a drone looking straight down. This was taken in June that year in the height of that activity with those gerbils. There was nothing there, man. It looked like a tennis court. And I was like, good grief, now what are we going to do? You had to wait another 6 months. Boom, same spot, 6 months later. That succession took off. We had those gerbils going for about 3 years, but they gradually got less and less and less. So that little chap is ultimately a golden hamster. That's all he is. And he doesn't like eating rubbish. He eats the best top perennial grass species. He shoves his cheeks full of it like a hamster, shoves his cheeks full of seeds. He makes that hole, and he goes and takes those seeds and he goes and plants it for you free of charge. Somebody upstairs had this all worked out. Okay, that's that story. Okay, and then just to get back to, I'm just going to end off with this one quickly, guys. Using the grazing system as a tool. It actually happened by mistake the first year. Obviously, I wasn't thinking, so excited about building these fences and putting cows into electric fences and moving them and bunching them. And anyway, I had heifers. I actually just put a whole bunch of heifers into that herd. And man, we put them in the beginning of December. And I thought to myself, let's just do a daily move through the system. And that's what we did. We moved through the system. And we got to preg testing that year. And I remember the vet was sticking his hands up. And he said to me, yo, Rowan, you know these things are on a dime, eh? And I thought to myself, what's he saying here? Anyway, I forgot about it, didn't think about it again. Came to calving, and all of a sudden, all that had happened is those cows had taken in the first cycle. And it was actually a bugger. I had heifers calving in amongst cows. We ended up losing cows. We had about 70% of those cows calve in the first 3 weeks of September. And I wasn't ready for it. But if you stand back once again and look at it objectively, that's most what you want. So now every year we do it on purpose. You just, instead of giving them 1 camp a day, give them 2 camps a day. Just for those 3 or 4 weeks, you can just push the production like that. So essentially what that strip grazing or camp system gives you, it gives you a steering wheel, a brake and an accelerator. And that's where this adaptive comes in again. When you learn to start using that to your advantage, fantastic things can happen, okay? So, okay, we all know that stocking rate and kgs per hectare equals profit. I know that. This was just the opposite of that. I'm just sharing with you as to what happened. So essentially what happened is those calves that were born early ended up spending 40 or 50, because they were born in the first cycle, ended up spending 40 or 50 days extra with mum. You take that all the way through to weaning, equates to 40 or 50 kilos extra per calf. Times 35 rand a kilo, works out at roughly about somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 rand a calf. There's the little sum, I'll put it there. Just something to think about, chaps, you know. Maybe we're a bit understocked. Okay, chaps, I'm going to end my talk here. I don't know if you can press play there at the back there, you guys. I just want to share this little video clip with you guys. Okay, this doesn't look very good. I was so proud of myself. This was Christmas Day 2016. You can see that mountain in the background. That's all I want to use as a reference. But I just want you to just have a look and see what that felt looked like. That was what that felt looked like in 2016. If we hadn't done what we did, we would have, hoe sê hulle, ons se gatte gesien. We still got a 92% conception that year, and it was amazing. Even moving through those camps with what looked like nothing there, those cows still found enough to sustain themselves in a day. Okay, so just take the mountain into account. I know I've got a bit dicker, but that was 2016 Christmas Day. Okay, right. You can press play on that one now too. That was Christmas Day 2022. You're going to see that same mountain come into view there now in a minute. This is my stepdad just standing in a sea of that grass. I showed you that electrotricon. There's that same mountain in the background. Yeah, and that's what can be done in 6 years, chaps, if you apply yourself, and there's still room for improvement. Thank you very much.